Did you see a lot of people change their minds over the course of your year in Iraq?
Yes, I think in the very beginning, in the early stages of the war, I think the Bush administration was very effective in their PR campaign to the American people in the ways in which they sold this war. But Mark, we're well into our 5th year. You know, there were no WMDs. We removed Saddam. We trained an Iraqi military. We gave them 3 democratic elections. And the violence has not stopped. The killings have not stopped. There is an all-out Sunni and Shia sectarian civil war, and these troops are out there patrolling the same streets, doing the same exact kind of missions over and over and over again, and they don't feel like they're making progress. And I mean, if you look at the situation now, I mean, if you were to do a poll in Iraq, and there have been polls done, the majority of the Iraqi people want us to leave there. These troops probably don't feel appreciated, and they don't feel probably as if they are protecting American freedom here at home. How are the Iraqis going to somehow take over the United States and take away our freedom? That's just ludicrous.
Well, you know, but George Bush will say that. He'll say, we're fighting over there so we don't have to fight here. And again, all I have to do is look at today's Washington Post, and we see right here, New York airport, target of plot, officials say. So they're still plotting against us.
And Mark, the people these terrorists that were going to attack JFK Airport, they were from the Caribbean. They were from South America. They weren't even of Muslim descent. And then you take a look at the previous attempt that was just halted at Fort Dix. Terrorists were going to go into Fort Dix, New Jersey, and kill U.S. troops. And I mean, not that long ago, the British uncovered a terror plot in London where terrorists were going to get on airplanes and try to crash them in the Atlantic Ocean.
It's a strange concept. Yeah. It makes you think that the administration thinks there's this limited body of terrorists. There's 4,233 terrorists, and it's like shooting ducks in a gallery, or playing a video game where you have only so many space invaders. And if you kill one, there's one less terrorist. Instead of understanding, as you pointed out, when you go in somebody's home and throw all the belongings, you create more terrorists than we destroy. Do you think we're doing that?
No. Well, I mean, you take a look at these 3 cases we just cited. You know, we have one at JFK Airport. We have one at Fort Dix. We had one in London. These aren't Iraqis, Mark. These are not Iraqis. So much for fighting them in Iraq so we don't have to fight them over here. The people in Iraq are fighting us because they don't want a foreign military over there. George Bush will just say, that's al-Qaeda who's doing it. But it's quite the contrary.
Well, let's say it's not al-Qaeda. I mean, can an argument be made that when we leave Iraq, there is a sectarian civil war?
Sure.
It's already started. When we leave, then the bloodbath will really begin, and the Shiites and the Sunnis will completely massacre each other. And heck, it'll be our fault because Saddam Hussein, as bad as he was a relatively stable dictatorship. So as Colin Powell once famously said, if you break it, you bought it.
Sure.
We clearly broke it. Why haven't we bought it?
Well, and just to echo what Colin Powell said, President Bush's father said the same thing. He said that's the reason why we didn't go all the way in '91 was because there would be no viable exit strategy.
But here's the thing. It's very interesting. I've seen the Republican rhetoric change. Very, very few people will today defend us going in the first place. I have Republicans on my show, and I ask them about going in the first place, and they dodge, and they weave, and they spin, and they won't answer my question, but they'll say, all right, whether or not it was a mistake, and I'm not conceding it was, what do we do now? And if we leave, won't there be a bloodbath? Isn't there an argument there?
There is. That is a very, very legitimate argument. And my only answer is whether we stay there 10 more weeks, 10 more months, or 10 more years. This is a problem.
The bloodbath will come no matter what.
The bloodbath will come. You know, maybe it will, maybe it won't. It's more highly probable that it will. But whether we stay there or whether we go, they are going to continue to fight each other. And the worst part about it is that both warring factions want to kill our troops too. And that's,
so at least they'll just be killing each other and not us in the middle.
And it's just unfair to...
You know, I bring up that in 1980s, Iran and Iraq killed 1 million people in the last great Sunni-Shiite war. And there was nothing good to say about that except that we weren't there. We were helping them kind of in the background, but we didn't have troops on the ground there. But let me ask you the question I asked before the break, because I don't have an easy answer for this.
I probably don't either.
Well, no, I actually think there is one. But here's a guy, you or anyone else, or a woman, and he or she has seen his or her colleagues die, friends of his or hers. try their best, good, young, courageous American men and women, and they've died. Or here's a vet who's been injured, who's lost his limbs, lost
Sure.
his arms, lost his legs. If we leave Iraq now, it would be admitting defeat. It would be telling the soldiers who are wounded, telling the families of the soldiers who died, it was all a waste, we accomplished nothing. Your son, your daughter, they fought honorably, they're honorable people, but they're dead for no good reason. And let me suggest to you that one of the reasons we're fighting this war today is the same reason we fought that war in Vietnam. We're doing so not because we're achieving anything, but because we don't want to admit to ourselves that we haven't achieved anything.
Mark, those soldiers that died in Iraq and the soldiers that have lost their limbs, they did that for each other. They did that for the fellow troops to the right and left of them. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. When you're over there and things get violent and the fighting starts, you do it for your fellow troops. The accusations of troops dying in vain, they should be directed at the Bush administration.
But see, here's the thing. You look at the widow crying about the loss of her husband. Mm-hmm. And most of them are men. There are some women that have died, but most of the deaths are men. And if we withdraw now, they will call it surrender. And they will say, my son died in vain. Now, it's interesting, if we continue it now, we might have 3,000 more deaths and 10,000 more wounded, sure, and another trillion more spent, and then we'll have twice as many who've died in vain. But then 10 years from now, when we have 20,000 dead and 3 trillion spent and hundreds of thousands of wounded, they'll say, well, we can't stop now. We have hundreds of thousands of wounded and 2 trillion spent and 10,000 dead. Right. If anything, the sunk cost increase. It's one of those things we actually learned in economics. It's called sunk cost.
Sure.
That basically, if you spend $1,000 on a bad land deal, mm-hmm, okay, don't double down. Don't throw good money after bad. Don't say, well, if I admit I've lost the money, I'll be upset that I've lost the money, so I'll put another $1,000 in the hope I'll somehow succeed. Cut your losses. But that's exactly what the Republicans are accusing the Democrats of, cutting and running. And they're saying, in effect, you don't support our troops because you're not giving them a chance to succeed. The same argument they made in Vietnam. That's a very emotional argument. How do you get out of the emotions and get into the logic, the facts? I don't have an answer for that. I was hoping you would.
Well, Mark, it's very tough. You know, it's extremely difficult for somebody like myself who fought in Iraq, who's very proud of my military service. I've served honorably. It's just very difficult for me to come home and say, our soldiers have died in vain. I look at it this way, and I don't want to sound repetitive. The way that I look at it is that we were forced into that war by the Bush administration, and we died for each other. We died for our fellow troops to the right and the left.